Hello and welcome to the module 5 of this training. In this training, we will actually be starting with object repository. I have taken VB scripting with you. Fine. Now I will be starting with object repository. I'll be covering these topics in object repository about object spy, object classification, features of object repository, local and shared object repository. Then we will be studying about object repository util object. I'll be giving you an overview of this as well. And so let's start. Okay, the first question over here which I have written in the topic is what is an object? Fine. If I open the browser, right, and suppose this is the page open in front of you, you as an end user, when you see this browser, you are able to understand that okay, fine, this is a button, this is a link, there is some text in the application. Out here we have the input box, this is an image for Mozilla Firefox. Fine. So as a user you understand that okay, fine, this whole thing is known as a browser. This inside a browser there is a page. Fine. Now how does QTP look at everything? How does QTP looks at everything? QTP actually sees everything as an object. Fine. For QTP, the browser is also an object, the page is also an object, the button is also an object, the text is an object, link is an object, input box is an object. Fine. If you would have ever heard QTP testers talking to each other, then they always talk in a language like fine, object is not visible, object cannot be found, or I cannot extract the object, something like that. Fine. So object is something on the web page or the application and the test. Fine. The application and the test as a whole is also known as an object for QTP. Right. Now I will record something. Right. I start recording, and suppose I click on this Google search button. Fine. So what happens is that a line gets recorded, and when I will run this line, fine, the same steps will be repeated. This I had explained to you earlier as well. Fine. But how actually the whole process is repeated? Fine. How actually the whole QTP recognizes that okay, from all the things in the page I need to click on this button. Fine. So the answer to this is similar to like, for example, you are given an address. Fine. And you need to reach to that address. You need to drive your car and you want to reach to that address. Fine. The first time when you reach over there, it gets into your memory, right? It gets into your memory that fine, this is the way to that particular address. You remember it. Fine. Similarly, QTP has also got a memory. Whenever you click on anything on the page, a link, button, or a input, you write inside an input box. Fine. That particular object, that particular button, that particular link, or that particular input box, image, anything, including the browser or the page, it goes inside the memory of QTP. Fine. So when you are running it, QTP refers to its memory and it correspondingly runs the code. Fine. I'm just giving you an overview. Now what exactly goes into the QTP memory? The objects which you use. Suppose I click on this Google search button, then this object Google search will go inside the memory. Fine. Now there is a classification of objects in the memory of QTP. QTP has classified all the objects. Fine. What do you mean by classification? I'll just explain you that. Hold on. I'll create a new project. I already have module 5. Fine. Well, I guess I stored it wrongly. It shouldn't be module 5 like this. Okay, fine. This is module 5, and in this I'm gonna make an Excel file. Okay, so what I was talking about was that object classification. QTP has actually classified the objects. Fine, I'll increase the font size so that it's visible to everybody. Fine, and hold on. Alright, so now, okay, now what QTP has done is that it has categorized everything on a page or an application into an object. Fine, that is, when you see this button, you call it a button on the page. QTP calls it a web button. Fine. Similarly, this input box, you call it as an input box or an edit box. QTP calls it as a web edit. Now, every HTML component, every component on the application, okay, QTP has categorized it into various classes, various predefined classes. For example, for you, this is a button word is predefined for you. Similarly, web button, QTP will call it as a web button. So I'm going to make a small table which will make you understand how QTP is actually categorizing the objects. Fine. For example, the first column name will be our language. I'm just talking it in a layman's term. Fine. Our language, the language of QTP, and the class name. Okay. Or sorry, QTP's language or the class name, like this. Now in our language, what do? We call a button as a button. Fine. QTP, it calls it as a web button. Okay, the B of web button is capital. Fine. Where we call input box as a input type. QTP calls it as a web edit. We call say something known as, we call a link as a link. QTP also calls it as a link. Okay, so these are the classes, predefined classes inside QTP I'm talking about, in which all the objects have been categorized. An object can be a web button, an object can be a web edit, an object can be a link. Then we call it a radio button. Fine. And QTP calls it as a web radio group. Fine, I'm right. And we have something known as text. Fine, we have what? Text in the application. Now generally text, 99.99% of the times the text falls under a category known as web element. Fine, the text is always under web element. I'll show it to you in some time. I'm just giving you a brief idea about what we are doing. Fine. Similarly, if there is a button in a Windows application, we always call it a button, right? For example, a button on this calculator. In Windows application, it will be a class called win button for QTP. Fine. For example, in this browser, this button will be in web button class for QTP, but QTP will call this button in the desktop based application as a win button. Fine. Now let us look at in a little bit detail. Similarly, this any edit box in the Windows based application will be known as a win edit. Fine. Link is known as a link only, and the names correspondingly change. The web part becomes win in Windows based applications. Fine. Now let us see how QTP is actually categorizing these objects and how QTP sees this page. For that, we will actually require help of this icon over here known as object spy. Object spy, as the word says, what is spy? Spy is something which goes behind the scenes and it extracts the information. Fine. So object spy is something which will go behind the browser and pull out objects and tell you how the objects are looked at by QTP. Object spy in layman's term is like an eye of QTP. Okay, it's the eye of QTP. when you click on this icon, this small window opens up. Okay, now there is a rule to use this object spy. The rule is that the application under test, this is my browser, and suppose I am testing on this browser, it should be opened behind QTP. That is, I maximize this application. This application is currently maximized, and now I maximize QTP. Fine. So this application is behind QTP right now. Okay, and now I click on this hand icon. When I click on this hand icon, QTP will disappear. Please note the point, QTP will disappear. Fine, and the application behind QTP will open. Look, I am able to see the browser. Fine. Now when I move my mouse over this Google search, okay, Google search button, fine, and click on it, QTP will come back. I'll again show it to you. I click on the hand and move my mouse over Google search. See, wherever I move my mouse, some part, that part is highlighted, and in object spy window I am getting something for every object, right? I move my mouse over Google search button, click on that button, and the QTP window comes back. Now out here, this is a web button. You see that? The class name, the property over here, that the category of this object is a web button. From QTP's perspective, from QTP's eyes, this is the class of this object is a web button. These are all the properties of this button: the X coordinate, Y coordinate, the height of this button, HTML ID, lot of stuff. What is the name of this button? Type is submit, value is Google search. Fine. So we will be using object spy a lot. We will be using this. This is somewhat similar to Firebug in Mozilla. Fine. Now if you look at this web button, it is falling under a hierarchy. Fine. The first thing in the hierarchy is a browser. If I click on the browser, I will get the properties of the browser. The class name for the browser is browser. So that means QTP calls a browser. I'll not write it over here. We call a browser, and QTP also calls browser a browser. Fine. This browser class object is there in the spy hierarchy at the top, obviously because the web button is inside the browser. Inside the browser there is a page. Fine. And these are the properties of the page. You see that? The title of the page, it's also giving you the title of the page, it's giving you the width of the page, the URL to which this page is pointing to, and a lot of other properties as well. Fine. So a page is, we know, what do we say while talking to each other? Open the page, or open the Google page, open the Gmail page, open the Facebook page. So we call it as a page. QTP also calls it as a page. Fine. Inside the page there is something known as web table. I want you to ignore a web table as of now. I will talk about web table in the next module. Fine. And somewhere below web table there is a web button. Okay, so this is how the hierarchy is displayed in the object spy. Similarly, when I click on the spy button again, I maximize Mozilla, maximize my QTP so that the application under test is behind QTP. I click on spy, and suppose I move my mouse over the link about Mozilla. Fine. I click on this link, and you see that the class name is link. QTP is actually seeing this object as a link, and you will get the properties of this link. Similarly, the text, suppose this is the text, your version of Firefox. See, the text always comes under a under a class known as web element. Fine. Most of the times in most of the applications, if you are going through text, the text will come under a class known as web element. This small thing over here, this is wait a minute, this thing over here, it's actually an image. It's not showing it as an image, it's showing it as a web element. Hold on. Suppose I go to the website gmail.com. Fine, and I click on this spy. See, this is the on the top right, this Google is a image. Fine, so QTP has categorized everything into a class. The class of that object is a image, right? So what we have studied till now, QTP has categorized all objects into various classes, right? And object spy is something which acts like a eye of a QTP. It will help you understand how QTP is looking at your browser. It is only object spy is only for a read only. It is for our information. It is to tell us how QTP is recognizing objects. Sometimes somebody says that okay fine, QTP is not able to recognize the object, so that means maybe he is facing some problem in spying as well, right? That can be one of the cases. Fine. Now when you are spying, there are some objects which are present behind the object spy, and sometimes you have the requirement to actually spy those objects. For example, the sign in button right now, the sign in button of Gmail is actually behind my object spy, and I need to spy it. So I need to move my object spy, but I cannot move my object spy directly. If you click on the object spy, QTP will come back. So you have to disable object spy while spying. You can press the control button of your keyboard, the bottom left control button of your keyboard. Click on it and keep on clicking, like don't release the click. Fine. What will happen is that the spy, it actually will get disabled. Fine. You can move the window. Suppose I spy on this sign in now, and after spying I don't want to click on it, I don't want to go back to my QTP, then I can hold the control button and move my mouse again, but I will not be able to spy anything. I can click on a link as well. I can click on this link. The next page will open. So as soon as I want that the spy should come back into the picture and I should start spying, then I can simply release this control button of my spy as well. Fine. So I release this, the spy is activated. Fine. And even by clicking the control button, I can also scroll the spy. Sometimes you have this requirement as well. Fine. So this is how you use object spy. Now QTP, as I told you, for QTP everything is an object, and QTP has categorized everything into various classes. One class is browser, one class is page, class name, web button, web edit, link, web radio group, web element. Now there are many other classes as well. I just given you small examples, small number of classes. For example, if it's a Windows based calculator, then if you spy this, then the number 9, see it's a win button. I'm holding the control of my keyboard right now. Okay, it's a win button. It's present inside a window, not a browser. Okay, in Windows based application there is no browser. Fine, this is present inside another class object known as window. Fine, so window is again a predefined class, win button is again a predefined class. This thing over here, the input field in which the results of calculations are actually displayed, this is known as a win edit. Fine, so now let's go further. Now QTP has classified it, QTP has recognized it. Now how does QTP record? And while recording, as I was talking about, it stores everything, each and every object into its memory. How does it store it inside a memory? Fine, we'll talk about it now. Now the memory of QTP is known as an object repository. Fine, the memory of QTP is known as an object repository. Now in QTP there are two ways to work. Fine, giving you overview, there are two ways to work. One is either you can work, just a minute, yeah, either you can work with your object repository or you can work without your object repository. Fine. In basic QTP, we will study how to work with object repository. When we study advanced QTP, we will study descriptive programming and all, and we'll see how to work without object repository using descriptive programming, VB scripting, creating objects, lot of stuff. Fine. So now out here I have got two ways. One is to work with repository, one is to work without repository. What is object repository? It is the memory of QTP. It's kind of a database in which QTP stores all the objects. So I'm going to open the object repository now. This is the icon for object repository, this small drum. You open it and it will be blank. A small window will appear. In this I have got some menu on the top, and this is test objects, checkpoints, output value. I'll talk about this in some time. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this window here and I will start recording. I am not talking about testing an application now. I am not talking about how to generate reports, how to file your bugs, how to make your test scripts, and talking about the features of QTP right now, because that is more important rather than testing. If you are clear with features, you can do the testing very easily. I'll talk about testing later on. Fine. So I'm starting the recording, and when I start the recording and I open my browser, fine. So this is the browser. I'll just restore it so that the object repository is also visible. Fine. Okay, now currently nothing is inside the object repository. The command to open browser, I have just I've got simple command systemutil.run and the exe path of my browser. Right, now suppose I click on this, or I write in this Google search input box, I write QTP. Fine, and you see that something has gone inside my object repository. Okay, I will just stop my script now. Let us see what has gone inside the object repository. The first thing is this. If I click on it, I will get the object properties. The name of the object is Mozilla Firefox Start. Fine, this is your browser, the class. You see the class? The class is browser. Fine, and repository local I'll talk about later on. These are some of the properties of the object. We'll talk about the properties as well. Now I want you to just concentrate on two things right now: name and class. Class of the object is a browser, and this is the name. Generally what happens is that the title of the browser is actually taken as the name. Fine, and you move further inside the browser. If you expand the browser, this is another object whose name is Mozilla Firefox Start and whose class is page. So this is the page class object inside the browser. Obviously in real time as well, we have got page or number of pages inside. We can have number of pages inside one browser as well. Fine, inside that page there is a web edit object. See, the class is web edit, the name is Q. The name of this input box is Q. Now suppose I spy my page again. The spy is also present in object repository. There is no difference between the spy present in object repository and the QTP window. No difference. Okay, you click on this spy, click on the hand, and now move your mouse over this input box. You see that? I'll just click on this input box. Now according to hierarchy in spy, the first thing is the browser, which is coming in my object repository as well. Then there is a page which is coming inside the object repository as well. These web tables are not coming. You don't require the web tables actually to be present over there. Directly the web edit Q will be present. You see that? If you see the properties of this input box, web edit, then the name of this web edit is Q. The same name is coming over here. Fine, and if you look at the description properties of this object, then the type is text, name is Q, HTML tag is input. Fine, if you look at the properties of the browser, then there are no description properties of a browser. There are no description properties for a browser. and the page as well. The description properties are there for the objects like buttons, links, text, web elements, um, radio button, something like that. All these objects. Fine. Now I'm gonna go into the recording mode again. I'm going to go inside the recording mode and I will click on the Google search button. When I click on the Google search button, see, this Google search button gets added inside the same page because the input box and the Google search, both of them are in the same page. See, the class of this object is web button, and these are the three descriptive properties. They are actually coming from SPY: type, name, and HTML tag. Fine. I'll talk about later on visual identifiers, ordinal, and additional properties. I'll talk about these things in some time. Fine. Now, when I spy this again, or let me start recording it. Fine. When I start recording this again, I maximize my browser. Now see, inside the browser is same, but as I have clicked the Google search button, the page has changed. Now because the page has changed, when I click on, say I click on the first link, learnqtp.com. Okay, I'm clicking on this link. Then what's happening is that inside the same browsers, two different pages are present. In the first page, this is my earlier page, right? I have got these two objects. Fine. In the second page, I just have got this QTP learn quick test professional link. See, the class of this object is a link. Fine. So objects are something which helps QTP to recognize the app. Objects are something which help QTP to organize itself, which helps QTP to actually run the script as well. Now, how does the objects they help? How do the objects they help QTP to run the script? Fine. Now, looking at the code, let us look at the code. Fine. If you look at this code, then the first line obviously is the command. The second line, what does the second line say? It says that browser Mozilla Firefox start dot page Mozilla Firefox start dot webeditq dot set. Now you must be if you notice very carefully, then the stuff which is not there in double quotes out here, browser, page, web edit, web button, link, these are the predefined classes which I talked about some time back, which are also there in the object repository. Fine. Browser is the predefined class, page is a predefined class, web edit is a predefined class. Now what does line number 2 stands for? Line number 2 says that fine, there is a browser class object in the object repository whose name is Mozilla Firefox start. So when QTP reads this line, it actually goes inside the repository and searches for a browser class object whose name is Mozilla Firefox start. So it finds that object. Fine. And then it reads that, okay, fine, inside it there's a page class object whose name again is a Mozilla Firefox start. Fine. So here is the page class object whose name is Mozilla Firefox start. Fine. After that there's a web edit, that is an input box whose name is Q, and that's inside the page, right? This dot separates it out. This dot actually separates it out. Web edit Q, this is the web edit queue. Fine. Dot set QTP. Now what do you mean by set? Set means set the value inside the input box, right? I'll be talking about these functions, set, click and all in some time. Fine. Now if you look at the second line, then obviously the story repeats itself. Browser class object Mozilla Firefox start dot page Mozilla Firefox start dot web button Google search dot click. But after that the browser remains the same. but the page changes because I'm clicking on the Learn QTP Quick Test Professional link. Okay, link dot click, right? Okay, now inside web edit we set, inside for the link we click the link. Fine. Now if you start making code yourself, if you manually write browser and you give a bracket, see automatically Mozilla Firefox start comes up. It picks up from the repository. I did not type Mozilla Firefox start. If you put dot, after putting dot, you will be seeing a hell lot of options over here. Lot of options. Fine. Don't get confused. We'll talk about these options. See that in this I have the page object. The purple thing over there is, it's known as that it's a predefined class. Okay, it symbolizes that it's a predefined class. Browser page, and when I close these brackets, I get the options for two pages which are actually available in the object repository. You see that these are the two pages, Mozilla Firefox start at QTP. So you can decide upon the page which you want to work on. Suppose I decide that fine, I want to work on Mozilla Firefox start. Fine, I close this bracket and put dot again. Again I get a lot of options over here. Okay, out of that I have two options, web button and web edit. These are again coming from object repository because QTP knows that inside this page I have these two objects in repository. One is of type web edit, one is of the type web button. You can double click on web button, put a round bracket, automatically Google search will come. Fine, and then dot. Now what do you want to do on this web button? There are these many options available. Fine, I'll say that fine, I want to click on it. This is the operation, this is what you want to perform on that button. Fine, in web edit we set the value, right? So this is how you actually map your code from the repository to the application. Okay, now when working practically you don't have to manually write this line. Okay, you can also open repository, expand the object repository, move your mouse to the desired location. See, I have moved my mouse over the 10th line, and you can drag this. I can drag the object over here. Okay, fine. Now suppose I'll generate the whole code again. Okay, I will generate the whole code again. I'll close this. I'll actually delete this. Now after opening the browser, right, what I need to do, on the default page, my browser is opening on the default page, this is the starting page of Mozilla Firefox. Fine, I'm not going to any special website like Yahoo or something like that. Fine, this is the default page of Mozilla Firefox start. Fine, and after opening it, I want to drag this web edit. I want to write something inside this Q web edit. So I will drag this web edit over here. Fine, dot set anything, or I had set QTP over here. Fine, and after setting QTP, I need to click on the Google search button. You drag this button, dot click command will be present. On the next page, I want to click on this link, Learn Quick Test Professional. Fine, right? So this code will be working. Now when I run this again, I'll run this code. I run this and it will open the browser, it will type QTP Google search. It was quite fast. Fine, it was very fast, so it's actually clicked on that link. Okay, now alright, now the thing is, there are a little bit of modifications, or there's a little bit of improvement which I can do in this. Fine, what all can I do? First of all, fine, I'll just note it down. Fine, I have to introduce something known as synchronization. Fine. And second is I want to improve the names. Fine, because I don't like the name of this object as Q. If somebody else is looking at my code, he will not understand it. Getting my point? Right? So these two changes I'm gonna do. What is synchronization? Fine. What is synchronization? Synchronization is something like, uh, suppose I'm clicking on this button. Fine. And the next page is loading. Okay, and suppose the next page is taking time to load. This link is taking time to appear. Fine. So how much time should QTP actually wait for the link to appear? That's one of the questions. So the first question for synchronization which comes into our mind is that how much time should QTP wait for object? Fine. And suppose if QTP is actually taking a little bit of time and you know that your application is slow, fine, the second question is which comes to your mind is that can I instruct QTP to wait for some time or a particular specific time? Fine. So these are the two questions which are coming into my mind. Okay, and the third question which comes into my mind is, fine, I agree that fine, my application is opening correctly, my application is fast, but I want that this link should be clicked only when the full page has loaded. I'm clicking on this button, I'm waiting for the next page to load, but I want that this page should actually load, this link should actually be clicked on when the next page has fully loaded. So the third question is, how can I wait for full page to load? Fine. So this all comes inside the synchronization category. Fine. Okay. Now I will move my mouse. I'll give a space over here. Okay. Now I'm going to write a line over here. Browser dot page, that is the page which is going to open, not the page on which the button was getting clicked. Okay, the page which is going to open. Browser dot page dot sync. Sync means synchronization, that is let the full page load. So by writing sync over here, I am telling QTP that let the full page load and only after that execute the line number 5. Fine. So the answer to this question has been, I've given the answer to this. Fine. That is, I will actually write the sync command browser.page.sync and I will wait for the full page to load. Fine. Now suppose the page is not loading. Suppose the page is taking a lot of time, there is some problem on the server and the page is stuck. How do I instruct QTP that fine, after this much time stop the code, report an error, whatever you want to do? That is something known as object synchronization timeout. That is the time for which QTP should wait for any object to be visible so that it can perform an operation on that object. Out here page is also an object. Out here this button is also an object. Out here this link is also an object. The browser is also an object. Fine. So suppose I'm writing on this web button, I'm clicking on this web button, but QTP is unable to find that web button. Fine. So how much time should QTP wait to find that web button. You can give QTP that time. You can instruct QTP that fine, wait for 20 seconds to find this button, or how much time should QTP wait for the full page to load. Page is also an object. Fine. The only difference is on this object web button I am performing the click operation. On this object page I am performing the sync operation. Fine. And how much time should QTP wait for clicking on this link if the link is not visible? Suppose the page is fully loaded but the link is not visible. Something wrong has happened on the site. So that is defined under something known as object synchronization timeout. So the answer to this is through object. Answer to the first question, how much time should QTP wait for the object? Fine. This comes from object synchronization timeout. Fine. And I have also answered this. Now how do you set the object synchronization timeout? That is the time for which QTP should wait for the object to be the time for which QTP should actually wait for the object, right? You go to the file settings menu for this test. Okay, you go to the file settings menu and then go to this run settings, the second tab. Okay, and out here you have a field called object synchronization timeout. The default value which QTP has given is 20 seconds. That is, QTP will wait for 20 seconds and then throw an error if it's performing an operation on any object, whether it is synchronizing a page, whether it is clicking on a button, whether it is writing an input box. If that object is not available, then it will throw an error after 20 seconds. It will find the object for 20 seconds. If it is able to find, very well and good, otherwise it will throw an error. Fine. And when error comes during the run session, what do? You pop up a message box. A message box will come in QTP. It will tell you about the error. We'll see that message box as well. Fine. So this is about object synchronization. Fine. Okay. Now another question. Can I instruct QTP to wait for some time? Yes, you can, by setting the object synchronization, or you can give a command known as wait. If I write wait 10, then out here I am forcing QTP to pause for 10 seconds. This will put a specific pause. It will put a direct pause of 10 seconds and it will halt the script for 10 seconds. Fine. So this is the answer for the second one, that is, you can use the wait command, right? So under synchronization I wrote 3 questions and I have answered all the 3 of them. Okay, the first question is quite important, that how much time should QTP wait for an object that is described by object synchronization timeout. If the page is syncing and if the page never loads in 20 seconds, QTP will definitely throw an error. Okay, suppose I run this code now. Fine, I run this code and QTP will open a browser and I close the browser immediately. Okay, so when I close the browser, see, no error message is coming. Fine, I am not getting any error message. QTP is waiting for 20 seconds. It will wait for 20 seconds and then throw an error. So let's wait for 20 seconds and see the error. What kind of error it comes up? What kind of error comes up? Right? Hold on. Okay. It will throw an error soon. Fine. I should have decreased the object synchronization timeout, but if hold on, it will throw an error. Yeah, you see that this is the error message. Fine, it took some time. The error message is cannot identify the object Mozilla Firefox Start of the class browser. Now first of all, why am I getting this window like this? I am getting a window like this because in the file settings menu I had selected the option pop up a error message from that drop list. Fine. And don't be afraid from this error. Some people, they just get afraid after seeing this dialog box. Read it. Fine. It clearly describes that cannot identify the object Mozilla Firefox Start of class browser. Okay, that means that it is not able to find this object. It's not even able to find the browser object. So it waited for it actually waited for 20 seconds. Fine. In this case, it actually waited for more than 20 seconds. Okay, I have to check why, because maybe some other application was looking in some other application. There are lots of applications opened in my window right now. Maybe it was trying to look in some other application. Fine. So but eventually it gave me an error. Fine. Similarly, for all the other objects it will give you an error, but mind it, be very careful. If I write the web edit name over here, if I manually change it, if I change it to say web edit search box, I manually change the object name. Now what's that? The object name over here is search box. The object name in the object repository is Q. Fine. So QTP will not be able to find the object in object repository. This is a different error. Okay. One error is that here where a lot of people get stuck. Fine. There can be two types of errors. How does QTP work? This is my QTP. This is QTP. Fine. This is object repository, and this is my application and the test. Okay. QTP will read the object repository and then it will try to map the object in the application. This is my application and this is my object repository. Suppose this object is not found in the application, it will synchronize for some time before throwing an error. But the case where it is not able to find the object in object repository itself is something different, like this one. Out here the search box will not be found in the object repository. Out here QTP will not synchronize. If I run this code, it will open the browser and immediately throw an error. This is a human mistake. This is not a mistake from the application. See the error. The search box web edit object was not found in object repository. It clearly describes you where QTP is stuck. Fine. So you'll have to be very careful. I'll rename my object back to Q. Fine. So be very careful about this. I'm talking about fundamentals here. I am talking about basics of QTP where people make mistakes. I have been working on it since quite a while. I have been teaching it since quite a while. I exactly know where people make mistakes. These are some of the points where they make mistakes, and even after making mistake, you should actually come to know that from the error message that what kind of message is that. Read the error message very carefully. Fine. Now moving further, I don't like this name Q. The second question in the repository, how can you improve the names of your object? I don't like this name Mozilla Firefox Start. I want to name my browser as Mozilla. Just Mozilla. I cannot name it like this, otherwise I will get an error, as I talked about some time back. So in order to change the name, you need to go to object repository and change the name. This is my browser. Fine, Mozilla Firefox Start. You highlight this, go to name and change it to just Mozilla and hit enter. So automatically it will change in the code as well. Fine. I will name my page as say Google page, and as soon as I hit enter, the page name on line number 2 and 3 will also change. You see that? And this page name I will name it as Google search result page. hit enter. Fine. I'll click on this web edit and I will call it as search box. Hit enter, it will change. But be very careful, don't change this name property. Don't change this. We'll talk about this in some time. Don't change it in the description. This is the external name. You can change it, which is mapped to the code, but don't change this one. Fine. Okay, so this is how you can, this is the very basic concept. This is very starting of object repository. That is, the objects, they get added into the object repository. You can drag them, okay, or you can generate your own code by dragging them. Wait will actually force QTP to pause for some time. Fine. If you want to load the page fully, then you have to use the sync command. Fine. And I'll just take one more example here. I'll just save this test first. I'll save this as in module 5. I'll say as OR basics 1. Okay, and you can download the code from the site as well, from your logins. After logging in, I'll make a new test, and this time I'll go to my I'll just correct my Mozilla settings. I will keep it a blank page. Whenever Mozilla opens up, show me a blank page. I start recording now. Fine. I record, open my browser. Okay. Go to the site. I'll go to my site qtpselenium.com. Okay. After going to my site, I click on this, suppose JUnit Selenium or test ng Selenium link. Fine. So this is the page I get. So this is a small code which I have executed. If you look at the code which is generated, the first line, what is a first line? It's a command. Command has got nothing to do with object repository. system.run is a command. It's not there, nothing is there in object repository. The next page is browser.page.sync. If I open my object repository, then this is the page. This is the blank page which got opened. So what QTP is writing, open the browser and then wait for that blank page to load completely. Fine. The order is not maintained in object repository. The order is alphabetic order. This page was actually opened before opening online Selenium training or online QTP training website. Fine. But the order is in alphabetic. It's an alphabetic order. Fine. After that, browser, that is there is a browser class object in the repository whose name is browser dot navigate to the website qtpselenium.com. Okay, I'll just drag it over here. When I write dot, okay, when I put a dot here, then a whole bunch of commands they come up, and navigate is one more command. Navigate is used to make QTP navigate to some website. Navigate is no class. It's not a make class. It's a command again. Fine. Remember that navigate is a command. Fine. Now, if I place, it's just for your knowledge I'm giving you, if I place my mouse in front of this dot and I hit control space bar, then I again get the list of options. So it's not necessary to delete this dot and again put it to get the list of operations. You can put a dot, move your mouse in front of the dot and hit control space bar. Okay, I'll write it over here. The shortcut is control space bar. Fine. After navigating to qtpselenium.com, I am clicking on the link test ng selenium, that is which is this link. Fine. So this is how you actually map the objects with the repository and work with repository. Again,